Government leaders and experts gather in Munich to discuss pressing global security issues with the situation in the Middle East high on the agenda. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights says Sudan's RSF committed atrocities during al-Fashir capture. And the DR Congo says it accepts the principle of Angola's proposed ceasefire. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Rama, who has our business headlines. Over to you, Rama.
Thank you very much, Richard. Here's what's coming up in the next half hour. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa unveils a plan to split the power utility Eskom. And Ghana's gold output hit a record 6 million ounces as the government there is planning a new royalty scheme. We'll have the data and the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Richard.
Thank you so much, Rama. Once again, a very warm welcome to Africa Live. Let's begin with our top story. China says it's stepping up diplomatic engagements on multiple fronts, holding talks with Ukraine and Argentina on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. Meeting Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, China's top diplomat Wang Yi said Beijing is ready to maintain communication and work with the international community toward an early political solution to the conflict in Ukraine. He reaffirmed China's position of promoting dialogue and peace talks and said China remains Ukraine's largest trading partner, pledging further humanitarian assistance. Kyiv welcomed China's role and said it hopes Beijing can help advance a ceasefire. In separate talks with the Argentine Foreign Minister Pablo Curno, Wang pledged to deepen the comprehensive strategic partnership between China and Argentina. He called for stronger cooperation in trade, technology, finance, and mining, and said bilateral ties are not aimed at any third party. Curno reaffirmed Argentina's commitment to the One China principle and welcomed greater Chinese investment. The 62nd Munich Security Conference 2026 is about to get underway. Nearly 50 heads of state and government, along with top defense officials and diplomats, will be there. Key attendees include Germany's Friedrich Merz, President Emmanuel Macron of France, and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, as well as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the heads of the UN, NATO, the EU, and the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. The transatlantic rift is expected to be one of the major issues at the forum, along with tensions between the U.S. and Iran. Natalie Carney has more from Munich.
Well, 3 days of hopefully constructive discussions amongst everybody. And in this sort of more polarizing world that we are experiencing at the moment, many people saying this meeting couldn't have come soon enough. Prior to these 3 days of talks, we received the Munich Security Report, an annual report, which really sort of sets the tone for the 3 days of discussions. And this year it really spoke about us being in an era of wrecking ball politics, where security norms are no longer guaranteed, and about the growing distrust that is building between traditional allies. So with that as the background, the main topics of discussion are going to be these transatlantic tensions between European partners and the United States, the future of NATO should the U.S. Pull back from that alliance, and therefore whether Europe can build and quickly enough more independence, both strategically and in the area of defense. As well with that, Ukraine, of course, is going to remain a hot topic this year, and the continued support efforts for its conflict with Russia. Other conflicts in the Middle East will be discussed, such as the U.S. proposed peace plan for Gaza, and other areas of conversation will surround cyber and energy security and the rapid developments we're seeing in technology such as artificial intelligence. What's really special about this conference has long been known about the intimacy of it, and many times the very candid conversations that are being had, and that's really sort of where decisions are made and policies are developed. So hopefully at the end of these 3 days we'll have sort of a better idea of where different nations stand on certain issues.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says multipolarity is defining the course of world development. The top Russian diplomat made the comments in a recent interview with CGTN's partner TV Bricks.
It is precisely multipolarity that now defines the trajectory of global development. For many years, the United States acted as a driver of the global economy and a regulator of global finance, using the role of the dollar to consolidate its dominant position. Today, it is objectively losing its economic influence and its weight in the world economy. At the same time, countries such as the People's Republic of China, India and Brazil are rising. On the African continent, very interesting developments are taking place, with African nations increasingly seeking to retain their natural resources domestically and develop their industries, following a path supported historically by the Soviet Union. That is to say, many centres of rapid economic growth have emerged, centres of power, centres of financial influence and political influence, and the world is being reshaped.
Despite ongoing diplomatic efforts to ease tensions between the U.S. and Iran, the AP reports that a second U.S. aircraft carrier is being deployed to the Middle East. This comes as Iranian Foreign Minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi says Tehran prefers diplomacy and that a nuclear deal with the U.S. is achievable if it is fair and balanced. He made the remarks on X on Thursday. On the same day, U.S. President Donald Trump said a nuclear deal with Iran has to be made and could be reached over the next month, or the outcome would be very traumatic. Iran's top security official, Ali Larijani, says a date for the next round of talks is undecided, but both sides want to continue negotiations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with Trump at the White House to express his skepticism. He says a nuclear deal must include missile limits on Iran. Tehran has rejected that. Iran and the U.S. held their first round of talks in Oman a week ago. China's Spring Festival travel rush period has entered its 12th day. Official data shows more than 280 million cross-regional trips are expected, a year-on-year increase of 4.5%. The country's national railway network is expected to transport 15.1 million passengers on Friday alone, along with 267 million trips by road. Meanwhile, airlines continue to increase capacity with an expected 2.46 million passengers taking flights. The Rapid Support Forces violations in Sudan during the capture of the city El Fasher amount to war crimes against humanity. The UN has made that statement very clear. The UN Human Rights Office interviewed over 140 victims and witnesses in El Fasher and eastern Chad in late 2025. A report published by the UN Human Rights Office documented more than 6,000 killings within the first 3 days of the RSF takeover. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk renewed his call for a truce between the warring parties. He further appealed to states with influence to act urgently to prevent the repetition of violations documented in El Fasher. Well, Sudan is moving forward with a nationwide digital transformation, introducing 28 new administrative services on its Baladna online platform. The portal is designed to bring procedures that once required long queues and in-person visits into one centralized digital system, allowing applications, registrations, and official transactions to be handled online. However, as CGTN's Naba Mouadine reports from Port Sudan, its success largely depends on the government's ability to maintain control and stability during an ongoing conflict that's almost 3 years old.
In Port Sudan, a city relatively untouched by the ongoing civil war, officials say the Baladna platform is already making daily operations more efficient and cutting bureaucratic delays. But the rollout faces hurdles in a country where infrastructure remains a major challenge.
The platform works effectively, and the progress is seen frequently, despite all of the technical and logistical challenges. This digitalized approach shall impact the customs work positively by saving time and shorten procedures. It shall also reduce smuggling and making verification of documents easier. That will impact e-commerce and all trade sectors. It shall link customers and tariffs with all economic activities and governmental services.
The Baladna initiative was unveiled in December as Sudan's national portal for public administration. Officials describe it as part of a broader effort to digitize government institutions, including plans for a national data center and expanded 4G infrastructure to improve access. The platform promises quicker services for businesses and citizens, but some users say it needs improvements.
I'm using the platform now from Port Sudan and can track the progress of a pending transaction. As a businessman, digitizing procedures should have a positive impact by reducing the role of brokers that slowed the old paperwork system. It also brings together the authorities we deal with, from the central bank to the trade ministry, customs and ports, on a single platform. Connectivity can be challenging at times, which is understandable in the context of war, but we're hoping for faster and more stable performance.
Technology experts say launching a centralized digital system during an ongoing conflict is both ambitious but risky.
The biggest challenges facing such projects are the infrastructure and stability. Although Sudan now possesses stable networking and alternatives to face the challenges. But at some point, you need a lot of cooperation and coordination to link all institutions together amid the current conditions.
While digitization can protect records and improve efficiency, there are concerns about cybersecurity and infrastructure resilience.
Officials insist the platform is a long-term investment in rebuilding public administration. Whether Baladna can deliver constant access across Sudan may ultimately depend on how quickly the country can stabilize its communications networks. Naba Muhyiddin, CGTN, Port Sudan.
Africa's health and finance ministers have called for a shift from donor dependency to self-reliance. The leaders are pushing for more local vaccine manufacturing and domestic resource mobilization to fund national health priorities. CGTN's Daniel Arab-Moy reports from Addis Ababa.
Under the shadow of rising global health threats and a sharp decline in international aid, Africa's health and finance ministers are seeking a more sustainable solution. Under the auspices of the Africa CDC, the ministers have rolled out a full-scale Africa health security and sovereignty agenda. It's a bold shift from dependency to self-reliance.
In the era of decreasing funding, people must think outside the box, have various ways of raising money domestically, taking ownership. Many countries have now come up with various taxes, like sin taxes, to finance their own health system. And this is something that we want to commend.
It's time to think about what we Africans can do ourselves in terms of local manufacturing of drugs. That should be a focus.
The agenda is designed to ensure that when the next pandemic hits, Africa isn't, in the words of leaders here, at the back of the queue.
A sovereign continent cannot depend on the fluctuation of external aid for its vaccines. We must finance our health through domestic resource mobilization and African-led financial institutions.
The targets are ambitious, localizing the production of 60% of Africa's vaccine needs by 2040 and establishing a digital health ecosystem that connects every rural clinic to a continental data center. But the assertion of sovereignty requires capital.
Advancing health security and sovereignty in Africa will require stronger and deliberate engagement with regional finance institutions.
Ministers are now pushing for channeling of sin taxes and health levies to bridge a massive financing gap, aiming to generate half of all health-related funding from domestic budgets. The message from Africa's ministers of health and finance is clear. Africa's health is no longer just a social sector, it's a pillar of national security and economic stability. Daniel Arab-Moy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The UN says the world is fast depleting its natural water resources. Among the worst affected continent is Africa, which faces perennial clean water supply crises. CGTN's Robert Nagila has that report.
Water is a leading resource in Africa, but the continent is facing a water crisis and the numbers are staggering. Out of a population of 1.4 billion people, about 411 lack basic drinking water services. Another 779 million lack access to basic sanitation services, while 839 million lack access to basic hygiene. The UN agencies blame climate change for water scarcity and drought. They estimate that by 2025, about 230 million people in Africa had insufficient water supply, with as many as 460 million living in areas where demand for water regularly exceeded the available water supply. And children are particularly vulnerable. A 2023 UNICEF analysis of 10 African countries found that 190 million children were at high risk from inadequate water, sanitation hygiene-related diseases, and climate change. The 10 countries in question were Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Chad, Côte d'Ivoire, Guinea, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, and Somalia. Meanwhile, North Africa has also been hard hit. The Food and Agriculture Organization recently said that in 2022, North Africa faced the worst water stress levels of any region in the continent at 121%. It also recorded the lowest freshwater resources per capita. FAO says 66 countries globally allocated 76% of their total freshwater resources to agriculture in 2022. Now, in comparison, 3 countries in Africa, that is Mali, Somalia, and Sudan, dedicated over 95% of their freshwater resources to agriculture. To reverse the trend, urgent national action is needed to achieve universal access to water and sanitation. Thus, as AU leaders gather under the theme of water resources, there is much to tackle on the continent. Boba Nagela, CGTN.
In Zimbabwe, a China-supported borehole drilling program launched after Cyclone Idai has become a critical support for livelihoods and small businesses. CGTN's Farhan Wakatuyu has this report from Mashonaland, East Province.
A solar-powered borehole drilled last year at Mahusekwa Growth Point is transforming daily life. Installed under a Chinese government initiative to restore water and sanitation services after a cyclone and droughts, it's now supporting dozens of small businesses.
We now have clean water to wash our products and for customers to wash their hands before they eat. We also fetch water to use at our homes because there is an intermittent supply.
Reliable water access has also created employment opportunities, especially for young entrepreneurs like car wash owner Loveness Marabwanya.
Maybe I was going to get people who were going to fetch the water for me from the river, but it's very far and I was going to pay more for that. To imagine that the water is just like a few meters away, so it's very easier and very convenient for me.
Now, the borehole behind me is solar powered, which means the community can access water at any hour of the day. That means greater reliability and sustainability. There are no longer any limitations of fuel costs or power cuts. Mahusekwa is one of more than 300 communities nationwide benefiting from boreholes drilled under the Chinese disaster assistance. Around 60 of them are here in Mashonaland East, mostly in rural areas where water shortages had long slowed development and undermined food security.
Boreholes came at the right time because remember the past 2-3 seasons we had dry spells.
Kwanzura says the availability of water is sustaining livelihoods and boosting production even during prolonged dry spells.
We have livelihoods in terms of cattle, livestock. People are doing broilers behind the scenes, road runners, goats, piggery projects within the rural setup. So if there is the missing link of water, it means we are going nowhere. Some of the areas in the villages, they are using it for nutrition gardens. They're going to the market, so they'll be watering their vegetables, they'll be watering their plants.
At a national level, authorities say the boreholes reflect a shift from emergency response to long-term resilience.
In any disaster recovery program, what we always talk about is building back better. And I'm sure this principle of building back better, you can actually see it in the way that we are establishing these boreholes in Chimanimani, in Masvingo, Midlands, and Mashis.
Beyond water access, China has also supported food security through agricultural training, helping communities rebuild stronger and more sustainably. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Mahusekwa, Zimbabwe.
Are Western countries recalibrating their position on the several military-led governments in the Sahel? In a notable shift, the United States says it's moving past what it calls policy missteps, emphasizing respect for sovereignty and shared security interests. However, experts warn that though policies might change, motivation remains the same: to keep the Sahelian states in a form of dependency. For more on this, here's Mamadou Tapili in the Malian capital, Bamako.
The recent visit to Bamako of U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Nick Checker, marked a turning point in U.S.-Mali relations. It was the first high-level U.S. engagement since military leaders took power in 2021 and followed years of suspended military cooperation. The U.S. State Department said the visit aimed to convey respect for Mali's sovereignty and to chart a new approach focused on security cooperation and economic engagement. It is a development that excites many ordinary Malians.
In Mali's current situation, we are ready to cooperate with all countries of the world in a win-win partnership. I see no problem with that. That is my wish.
The U.S. shift reflects a broader reassessment among Western nations. France recently ousted Chad President Mohamed Idriss Déby, a former military ruler, while Washington has also signaled willingness to engage with Mali's military-led allies Burkina Faso and Niger, highlighting how pragmatism and modern demands are increasingly outweighing democratic conditionality.
All of this is reflected in the search for raw materials and rare earths. You have seen that Donald Trump has traveled to China to negotiate with Chinese president to secure rare earths, while China clearly has companies operating in AES countries exploiting lithium and other minerals that could interest the Americans. That is why the Republican Donald Trump has decided to move closer to the AES countries in order to also benefit from these advantages.
Analysts warn that sustaining this new approach will depend on trust, consistency, and tangible outcomes lessons drawn from years of fluctuating Western engagement in the region.
After our region was subjected to all kinds of pressure, and since we refused to give in, Western countries are now attempting to change their strategy. However, we are fully aware that their objective remains the same: to control the development of Sahelian states and keep them in a form of dependency.
The renewed U.S. outreach also raised questions about Mali's deepening ties with Russia. Bamako has strengthened security cooperation with Moscow in recent years after breaking defense ties with the Western partners.
Indeed, the Americans are looking for a living space, as we say in geopolitics, mainly to counter the Russians, who are already there and are certainly doing a good job. They are seeking to help these countries regain their sovereignty. Donald Trump, in his way of seeing things and his entrepreneurial approach, understands very well how things work. And his special envoy to Mali has said it is necessary to correct the mistakes of Joe Biden.
As global leaders debate Sahel security at forums like the Munich Security Conference, Mali's engagement with Washington signals a broader shift in how the West approaches military-led government in the region. Mamadou Tapili, CGTN, Bamako.
Time now for a short break. We shall reset and return with more Africa Live. Here's what's ahead. Coming up, the DR Congo says it accepts principle of Angola proposed ceasefire. Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The Democratic Republic of Congo has agreed to a ceasefire plan proposed by Angola as regional mediators push to end fighting in the country's east. In a statement, Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi says he agreed to the proposal, quote, in principle of responsibility and de-escalation, close quote. Angola, which has served as a key mediator of the conflict, proposed a ceasefire between the DRC government and the M23 rebel group earlier this week. But M23 says they were not informed of the Angola proposed ceasefire and did not know the details of the plan. Speaking after the meeting, the UN peacekeeping force known as MONUSCO in the eastern city of Goma, Benjamin Mbonapa, a senior M23 official, said they fully support the ceasefire monitoring framework agreed in Doha. In recent weeks, clashes have been reported in South Kivu province.
A statement from the office of Angola's president, João Lourenço, who's also the current AU chairperson, proposes that the ceasefire in eastern DRC take effect on February 18th ahead of an inter-Congolese dialogue. The proposal awaits approval from the DRC government and the M23 rebels. Both sides have intensified attacks on each other's positions in South Kivu province since the beginning of this year. The M23 rebels recently claimed responsibility for a drone attack that targeted an airport in the DRC's northeastern city of Kisangani. The rebel leader said the airport was a base for carrying out attacks against their positions and civilian populations, but the DRC government denied the allegation. The clashes have continued despite mediation efforts by the United States and Qatar. DRC President Felix Tshisekedi recently visited Angola to meet with other African leaders and discuss ways to end the conflict. But Rwanda's Minister of Foreign Affairs has cast doubt on the DRC's willingness to honor the new ceasefire proposed by Angola. Several ceasefire declarations signed by the DRC, Rwanda, and the M23 rebels have been violated since the conflict began in late 2021. Regional leaders and international partners are increasing efforts to end the conflict that has caused a humanitarian crisis in eastern DRC. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The United Nations peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is planning to conduct aerial reconnaissance flights over the eastern city of Uvira. This is part of preparations for deployment of troops to monitor a ceasefire agreement that the DRC government and the M23 rebels signed in Qatar last year. CGTN's Joy Kuruki Juma has more.
The DRC government and the M23 rebels have agreed to have UN peacekeepers conduct air surveillance in the city of Uvira in eastern Congo to monitor their agreed ceasefire deal. The UN peacekeeping mission MONUSCO says the first mission will take place shortly.
MONUSCO will deploy an initial aerial reconnaissance mission to Uvira in the coming days. My visit aims to engage with relevant stakeholders and advance concrete preparations, verification procedures, coordination, communication, and practical conditions for the mechanism to function credibly. MONUSCO will continue to support the ongoing peace process. Support for the ceasefire will be provided gradually according to arrangements confirmed in the agreed architecture and security guarantees.
The M23 rebels captured Uvira in December last year. International pressure calling for strict adherence to the Doha Agreement made them opt out days later. The Congolese army took control of the town in January this year.
Once we reach an agreement to sign the agreement, the comprehensive agreement that includes the protocols, life will return to normal, the airport will reopen, and the Congolese people will be happy to find lasting peace.
The instability in eastern DRC has left thousands dead and millions of civilians displaced since 2021. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Authorities in southern Mozambique have restricted sailing in the Indian Ocean and stepped up warnings as Cyclone Gazani approaches the country's coastline. Residents in the seaside town of Inhambane are reinforcing homes and securing boats. Forecasters warn of strong winds, heavy rain, and rough seas. CGTN's Sharon Baranga has more details.
Homes in Inhambane are being fortified with sandbags and even concrete blocks as residents brace for the expected impact of Cyclone Gezani. Villagers were seen on rooftops placing heavy bags of sand and lining up breeze blocks to weigh down corrugated iron sheets against expected gale force winds.
Já temos informação que haverá ciclone.
The community is getting prepared. I am putting various objects on my house, like bags full of sand to reinforce the roof. I'm also putting pieces of corrugated iron in the windows, so that when the intense wind blows, it won't destroy my house.
Memories of previous cyclones remain fresh here, prompting many to act promptly.
As we suffered with the previous cyclone, I am concerned. I am tightening windows and closing them properly. We need to be in a safe place because we don't know how strong the wind will be. We are putting sand on top of the roof so that we can avoid the worst.
Officials from the National Institute of Marine Transport have banned sailing in the southern provinces expected to be hardest hit. Along in Hambane Bay, fishing boats now remain anchored.
What we are doing on the ground is to continue spreading the information so as to reach as many as possible and those who are not informed. Our objective is to ensure that there is no accident.
Cyclone Gezani is forecast to bring powerful winds, heavy rainfall and high seas as it nears making landfall. Communities along Mozambique's southern coastline are racing to finalize preparations for what could be a devastating strike by Mother Nature. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
Malawi has rolled out its first nationwide anti-polio campaign. The goal is to vaccinate 1.3 million children under the age of 10. This follows a detection of the virus in environmental samples. Polio remains a recurring threat in Malawi, with the last major outbreak recorded 4 years ago. Here's CGTN's Caroline B. with more on this.
Frontline healthcare worker Elizabeth Malango has taken on extra duties, moving door to door and in the streets of Ndirande Township in the commercial city Blantyre. She's urging parents and guardians to allow their children get a polio vaccine.
It is my wish to see no case of polio in this area. All children need to be vaccinated. If one is found with polio, it automatically traumatizes the parents.
The polio virus affects the nervous system and, if left unchecked, can cause irreversible paralysis for children under 5. Elizabeth and her fellow health workers are working with communities, educating them on the health benefits of the polio vaccine.
I have decided to have my child vaccinated because I do not want her to get polio. I'm appealing to all parents to allow their children get this vaccine for their own protection.
At the start of February, Malawi declared a polio outbreak. Samples of poliovirus type 2 were detected in a routine sewage surveillance at 2 sites in Blantyre. But religious and social barriers continue to hinder efforts to eradicate polio.
There are some religions that don't believe in going to the hospital. And there are some cultures which don't believe in vaccines as well as going to the hospital. So these are some of the things that still exposes these children to these viruses, including polio.
Officials say while attitudes are slowly changing, populations with poor sanitation and low immunization coverage are at risk.
While many children are being vaccinated, there are some that miss or are not consistent with vaccination schedules, putting them at risk. It compromises their immune system, and it could be one of the reasons why we have this polio case.
Malawi has received support from the UN's children agency UNICEF in its efforts to contain the latest polio outbreak.
The vaccine we're using has not been used in Malawi before. The NOPV, UNICEF has supported to bring the vaccine to the country. We have 1.7 million doses that have been brought into the country to facilitate the quick response to the outbreak.
The last case of polio to be detected in Malawi was in 2022, and the ongoing mass immunization drive will continue in the coming days as authorities work to end this new outbreak. Caroline B., CGTN.
Rama's in the studio, and that means it's time for our business segment. Over to you, Rama.
Thank you very much, Richard. Here's what's coming up in the world of money. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa unveils plans to split the power utility Eskom. And Ghana's gold output hit a record level, 6 million ounces, even as the government is mulling over a new royalties scheme.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa. So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's start in South Africa. Authorities there say they will push ahead with breaking up the power utility Eskom to create a standalone firm to run the national transmission grid. President Cyril Ramaphosa said this is a key reform that's being monitored closely by international investors. Africa's most industrialized economy and its largest economy at the moment, it has been hobbled for years by rolling outages as the state-owned utility has struggled with a combination of aging power plants, deferred maintenance, corruption and weak finances. Splitting Eskom, or unbundling it to use an industry term, is meant to attract a lot more private capital into the energy space and to build a more modern, reliable electricity system. Power transmission is one of the biggest constraints to adding new electricity supplies and, by extension, national economic growth. In a national address, Ramaphosa confirmed plans for a fully independent, state-owned transmission entity that will own and operate grid assets and run the electricity market. At the same time, South African consumers and businesses are barely able to keep the lights on, but now they're having to deal with yet another problem. Power prices will rise by nearly 9% both this year and next year after miscalculation of tariffs. The hike comes at a fragile time for the economy, with households grappling with high living costs, while companies, on the other hand, are battling shrinking margins. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
For small businesses already under pressure, the increase is immediate and personal. Social enterprise I Love Coffee trains and employs hearing-impaired youngsters. But after years of above-inflation electricity increases, it is becoming harder to absorb the rising costs of simply staying open.
We are heavy consumers of electricity with our ovens and things like that. And these kinds of increases really impact on how many students I can afford to take on an annual basis to go through training and get them into the job market.
The latest round of electricity tariff hikes has sent shockwaves across South Africa. From expected increases of 5.63% and 6.19% in 2026 and 2027, they will now shoot up by almost 9%, digging a deep hole in consumers' pockets. The country's energy regulator, NERSA, said earlier in the week that it had granted Eskom the larger rate increases following errors in its earlier calculations. For small enterprises, it threatens hiring and expansion. The impact will be felt far beyond cafes and shops. Energy-intensive industries from manufacturing to mining say they too are being squeezed by the rising cost of power.
The mining industry has really been taking strain with the high electricity prices, especially, the gold and platinum producers. But the good thing is that has been offset by good commodity prices. But they are definitely feeling the crunch now.
The increases stem from what regulators describe as a tariff miscalculation, now being corrected through higher charges to consumers and businesses. Government says it faces a difficult balancing act, expanding access to electricity while trying to keep it affordable in a country with deep inequality.
We're in a country with a massive unemployment rate. We have a very high rate of indigence, and we need to make sure that we are providing universal access to energy for everybody in this country. And we can't do that if we're making electricity unaffordable.
But as higher costs take their toll on the economy, the decision is being challenged. Cape Town municipality is taking the matter to court in an effort to halt the increases, arguing they will deepen financial strain on residents and businesses already battling weak growth and high unemployment.
And I'm glad they are, because all of a sudden Eskom seems to have additional power and they're able to discount to smelters like they've always done in the past. So I'm not sure why NERSA should allow them to put such a massive increase through when we are targeting a 3% inflation rate.
Government is undertaking a broader review of rising electricity costs, which have become unaffordable for millions. With Eskom's finances still constrained after years of corruption and mismanagement, relief may not come soon enough, leaving both consumers and businesses to shoulder the burden of keeping the lights on. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town.
Now on to a pair of stories dealing with commodities. Let's start in Ghana. The country produced a record 6 million ounces of gold last year, according to provisional data, with large-scale mines contributing about 2.9 million ounces. Now, even though the production data remained pretty much unchanged compared to last year, the industry is cautioning that next year's target of 6.5 million ounces of output is at risk, and is citing concerns over Ghana's planned overhaul of mineral sector royalties. This move, they say, could delay new projects and expansions that essentially underpin the 2026 production targets. The CEO of the Ghana Chamber of Mines said that the 2025 production beat its targets due to artisanal and small-scale mining, which rose to 3.1 million ounces of output. Record high bullion prices have seen gold prices over $5,000 an ounce. That price incentive that he provided helped to divert more artisanal gold supply into formal channels under recent reforms, according to the CEO of the Ghana Chamber of Mines on the sidelines of the African Mining Conference. Now, Ghana, like many other African countries, is raising mining taxes as governments are looking to capture a lot more revenue from natural resources as commodity prices have risen. Over in Egypt, Cairo's busy gold market is recording a sharp rise in demand for the precious metal as citizens are looking for a hedge against inflation, currency devaluation and just to preserve capital. And it's not just citizens. According to the World Gold Council, central banks too have jumped in and they've added hundreds of tons of bullion to their currency reserves. Here's more on that story.
Demand for gold bars and coins in Egypt is rising. Buyers are seeking a safer store of value amid volatile markets and economic uncertainty.
Gold bars and coins have been available in Egypt for 40 years and there were no problems with them. You'd simply come to the shop and buy your bar on the spot. If we talk about the average weekly sales of gold bars in a jewelry shop, we used to sell about 5 a week, each weighing 10 grams or less. Now, if you have 4 kilos of bars, you can sell them all in one day. What I'm trying to say is that we're now seeing an increased demand for gold bars.
Globally, gold surged above $5,100 an ounce in late January, extending a historic rally as investors piled into the safe haven asset amid rising geopolitical uncertainties.
I buy gold bars because they preserve their value better, have lower workmanship charges and offer cash back when resold. It's better than jewelry.
The metal eased 0.4% after strong U.S. labor data tempered hopes of near-term Federal Reserve rate cuts, though demand remained underpinned by heightened geopolitical risks, including tensions between the United States and Iran. Gold is widely regarded as a safe haven and typically performs well in low-interest rate environments.
There is uncertainty about preserving money, so ordinary citizens tend to buy coins and bars, which is taking a large share from the gold jewelry market.
Local traders say price swings in Egypt have closely tracked the global rally, adding to the push for gold bars and coins, which have stood the test of time as currency power fluctuate. Caroline B., CGTN.
Morocco is stepping up efforts to reduce the use of cash, and it's using a new fund backed by a range of international partners. It's partly supported by a $500,000 grant from the African Development Bank, and this plan is looking to expand the use of digital payments in the North African state and to equip thousands of merchants with electronic payment tools nationwide.
Bank Al Maghrib has partnered with the African Development Bank to support digital payment adoption among 20,000 Moroccan merchants, expanding access to electronic payment terminals across small shops and businesses.
Electronic payments tools are now affordable for most businesses, and nearly 70% of customers prefer to pay this way. It makes transactions safer and more convenient.
Small business owners say digital payments are becoming increasingly essential as customer habits evolve and tourism continues to grow.
Relying on cash alone is no longer practical for daily payments in shops, small businesses, malls and markets. Electronic payment solutions help boost our activity. Customers don't have to worry about carrying cash, and managing income becomes easier when payments are digital. It also supports tourism in Morocco, as most visitors tend to spend more when they can pay by card.
Economic observers say the new fund will help move merchants away from cash while supporting a more efficient and transparent payment system.
Moving towards loans and investments in this field will encourage the development of dedicated digital payment infrastructure by expanding the availability of electronic payment terminals and giving incentives to merchants, whether small retailers or others, to adopt electronic payment methods. This would also support the growth of e-commerce networks based on digital payments.
Backed by international financing and rising consumer confidence, digital payments are gaining momentum in Morocco. Authorities say the new fund is a key step toward reducing cash dependency and reinforcing the country's broader digital economy. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN.
I'll leave you there for the time being, but here's what's coming up at the top of the hour. African heads of state and government are gathering in the Ethiopian federal capital, Addis Ababa, for their annual summit. They're hoping to forge common ground on a whole host of issues as the continent is grappling with the ripple effects of a fast-changing, fast-moving world order. We'll have the details on that and lots more at the top of the hour. See you at 1800 GMT. For now, back to Richard for the sport.
Thank you so much, Rama. And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports segment coming up after the break. Let's take a look at those headlines. Coming up in sports, Kenyan's capital is ready to host the world's best rugby sevens players in Division II level this weekend.
The greatest journeys, the greatest